Everybody blames the sun. A lawn goes brown in July, and the first thing out of every homeowner's mouth is that it's just too hot. Nothing you can do. Wait for fall. That explanation is wrong for the majority of the lawns I walk, and believing it is exactly what stops people from fixing the actual problem before it gets worse. Heat isn't what's killing your grass. Heat is just the trigger that exposes a problem that's been sitting under the surface all along. And today, I'm going to show you what that real problem actually is, how to check for it in your own yard in about 2 minutes, and what to do about it before the next heat wave finishes the job. My name's Denny. I've spent the last 20 years working on lawns for a living, and I promise you, once you understand this, you'll never look at a brown patch the same way again. Here's the actual mechanism, and once you understand it, this whole video is going to make sense. Grass roots don't just need water to survive, they need oxygen. Just like every other living root system on the planet, roots respire, meaning they consume oxygen and release carbon dioxide, exactly the way your lungs do. And that oxygen has to come from air pockets in the soil surrounding the root. When soil is loose and healthy, those air pockets are everywhere, and oxygen diffuses down to the roots constantly, even through a layer of soil that's holding plenty of moisture. But when soil becomes compacted, whether from foot traffic, heavy mowing equipment, or just years of settling without ever being disturbed, those air pockets collapse. The particles press together, water fills whatever space is left, and the roots below suddenly have almost no oxygen supply. A root system starved of oxygen weakens dramatically, shrinks in mass, and becomes far less capable of pulling up whatever water is actually available in the soil. That weakened root system is the lawn you're looking at in June, before the heat has even arrived, quietly struggling and getting weaker by the week, completely invisible from the surface because the grass above ground still looks green. Then July hits, and here's exactly what happens next. A healthy oxygen-rich root system with strong root mass can pull water from 6 inches down or more, even during a stretch of 95-degree days, because it's got the physical capacity to chase moisture and the metabolic energy to keep functioning under stress. A weakened oxygen-starved root system, the one that's been struggling quietly under compacted soil for months, simply doesn't have that capacity. The moment demand for water spikes because of the heat, that already compromised root system can't keep up, and the grass above ground collapses fast, sometimes within days. That's the part that fools people. The lawn looked fine in May and June. It goes brown practically overnight in July. So naturally the heat gets blamed, because the heat is the thing that was happening right before the collapse. But the heat didn't create the weakness. It just exposed a weakness that was already there. The same way a marathon doesn't cause a bad knee. It just reveals one that was already damaged before the race started. Here's how to check whether this is actually what's going on in your yard. And it takes about 2 minutes with a tool you almost certainly already own. Grab a plain screwdriver from your garage. Any length works fine. And push it straight down into your lawn in 4 or 5 different spots, especially anywhere that struggled last summer or anywhere with regular foot traffic. If it slides in 6 inches with light hand pressure, your soil has plenty of oxygen moving through it, and compaction isn't your problem. Whatever's causing your lawn stress is something else. If you have to lean your body weight on it just to get 2 or 3 inches down, you've found compacted soil, and that compaction is very likely the real root of whatever brown patches or thin spots you dealt with last summer. Pay close attention to the high traffic zones specifically, because compaction is rarely uniform across a whole yard. The strip of lawn between your back door and the grill, the path the kids run to the trampoline, the spot where the dog does laps along the fence line, all of that gets hammered down over months until the soil there turns into something closer to concrete than dirt. While 30 feet away in a section nobody walks on, the soil might still be loose and healthy. That's exactly why a lawn can look green in most places and brown in oddly specific patches during a heat wave. It's not random. It's mapping directly onto wherever the soil got compacted. Before you commit to this diagnosis, it's worth ruling out the other usual suspects, because compaction isn't the only thing that can masquerade as simple heat stress, and treating the wrong problem wastes a season. If you pull up on a brown patch of grass and it lifts away in your hand like a loose piece of carpet with almost no roots holding it down, that's not compaction, that's grub damage, since the larvae have been feeding through the root system just below the surface, and there's nothing left anchoring it to the soil. Compacted turf, even when it's brown and struggling, still resists that pull because the roots, weak as they are still physically present and attached. If the damage shows up specifically along hot sunny edges like sidewalks and driveways, rather than spreading through open lawn, that pattern points more toward chinch bug activity than compaction, since chinch bugs concentrate in exactly those reflective heat zones. And if you see circular or irregular patches with a slightly darker ring at the edge, especially after a stretch of warm, humid nights, that's more consistent with a fungal disease like brown patch than simple compaction. The screwdriver test is still worth running regardless, because compacted soil often sits underneath these other problems and makes a lawn more vulnerable to all three. But running that quick tug test and looking at the pattern of the damage first will save you from aerating a lawn that's actually dealing with grubs or fungus and wondering 3 weeks later why nothing improved. Quick, before I get into the fix, if you're serious about addressing this instead of just watering harder and hoping for the best, you need the right plan. That's why I wrote the book, a straight step-by-step blueprint to a greener lawn with fewer weeds, exactly what to buy, where to get it, and when to put it down. Scan the QR code or click the link below to grab your copy. Now let's talk about the fix, and there's a mechanical option and a biological option, and I want to walk you through both because they solve the same problem in genuinely different ways. The mechanical fix is core aeration, which is exactly what it sounds like, a machine that pulls small plugs of soil out of your lawn and deposits them on the surface, physically creating channels for air, water, and nutrients to reach down to the root zone immediately. A rental core aerator runs somewhere around $70 to $100 for a half-day rental at most equipment rental places. And for a standard suburban lawn, that's usually enough time to cover the whole yard if you move at a steady pace. The best time to aerate is right before your grass enters its most active growth period, which for cool season grass means late summer into early fall, and for warm season grass means late spring, because aerating right before active growth means the plant recovers fast and actually uses those new channels to push roots deeper almost immediately. This gives you an instant physical fix. The compacted layer gets broken up mechanically in a single afternoon, and you'll typically see the lawn responding within 2 to 3 weeks with noticeably better color and density in whatever areas were compacted. The biological fix works slower, but it's the one that actually prevents the compaction from building back up year after year, which a mechanical aeration alone doesn't do. Soil that's rich in biological life, earthworms, beneficial fungi and bacteria, essentially aerates itself continuously, every single day for free. A single healthy earthworm can move roughly its own body weight in soil every day, tunneling through the ground and creating exactly the kind of air channels a rental aerator creates mechanically once a year. Except the earthworms never stop working. A lawn with a strong population of these organisms, dozens of earthworms per square foot in good soil, essentially never gets compacted in the first place because the biology is constantly working against it. The way you build that population is by feeding it, and the simplest, cheapest way to do that is a light application of quality compost, spread about 1/4 inch thick across the lawn and watered in, done twice a year, once in spring and once in early fall. That compost feeds the exact organisms that create and maintain those air channels naturally. It's slower than a rental aerator. You won't see dramatic results in 3 weeks the way you would with mechanical aeration, but over 18 months to 2 years of consistent compost applications, a lawn genuinely stops needing that annual aeration rental at all, because the soil biology has taken over the job permanently. I run both together on the lawns I manage, because they solve the same problem on 2 completely different timelines. Aerate mechanically this fall if your screwdriver test shows real compaction, because that gives you the immediate fix before next summer's heat arrives. Then start building compost applications into your spring and fall routine on top of that, because that's what keeps the compaction from creeping back in over the following years. Skip the aeration and only do compost, and you're waiting a long time to fix a problem that's actively hurting your lawn right now. Skip the compost and only aerate, and you'll be back at the rental place every single year indefinitely, treating a symptom instead of the underlying cause, which is exactly the trap a lot of lawn care programs keep you in, without ever mentioning the biological piece at all. Let me walk you through what this actually looks like once you've identified compaction and started fixing it, because the timeline matters for knowing whether it's working. Week 1 after core aeration, the lawn looks a little rough, honestly, with visible soil plugs scattered across the surface. And that's completely normal. Just let them break down naturally with mowing and rain rather than raking them up. Weeks 2 through 3, if you run the screwdriver test again in the same spots, you should notice it sliding in noticeably easier than it did before aeration. since those mechanical channels are still open at this point. Weeks 3 through 6. This is when you'll start seeing a visible difference in color and density, specifically in the areas that were compacted. Since roots are pushing down into that newly loosened soil and accessing water and oxygen they simply couldn't reach before. By the time the next heat wave arrives, a lawn that went through this process is pulling water and oxygen from a much deeper, healthier root zone than it was the summer before. And that's the difference between a lawn that goes dormant gracefully during a hot stretch and one that collapses into crispy brown patches within days. There's a mowing habit tied directly into this whole compaction story that most people never connect. And fixing it costs nothing beyond adjusting your mower deck. Mowing grass short doesn't just weaken the plant above ground. It actively works against root depth in a soil that's already struggling for oxygen. A plant generally only grows roots as deep as the leaf surface left standing can support through photosynthesis. So cutting your grass down to 2 inches because it looks tidy keeps root growth shallow regardless of how loose or compacted your soil happens to be. Combine that shallow root habit with actual soil compaction underneath, and you've got a root system fighting 2 separate battles at once. Limited depth from mowing height and limited oxygen from compacted soil, which is exactly the combination that produces the fastest, most dramatic collapse the moment a real heat wave arrives. Raise your mower deck to 3.5 to 4 inches for cool season grass, or 2.5 to 3 inches for warm season grass, and you're giving whatever root system you do have the best possible chance to push down through those compacted layers you're working on, loosening with aeration and compost. It's a small adjustment. It takes about 10 seconds to change on most mowers, and it removes one of the 2 factors working against your root system while you handle the other one with a rented aerator and a bag of compost. I want to be honest about why this connection between compaction and heat death doesn't get talked about as much as it should. And it's not some grand industry conspiracy. It's just simpler and more profitable to sell a bag of fertilizer or a bottle of fungicide than it is to sell the idea of renting a machine and waiting 2 years for compost to fully solve a problem. A bag of fertilizer promises a fast, visible result in a week, easy to sell, easy to repurchase every season. Aeration and soil biology promise a slower fix that genuinely solves the underlying issue, but that's a much harder thing to put a flashy label on. And it doesn't create a repeat purchase the way a bag of quick-release nitrogen does. So the industry defaults to selling you products that treat the symptom, the brown color, rather than the actual cause, which is a root system that's been suffocating under compacted soil since before the heat ever showed up. Here's your plan. Grab a screwdriver and test 4 or 5 spots around your yard this week, paying special attention to high-traffic areas like paths to the shed, the trampoline, or the dog's regular route along the fence. If it's sliding in easily everywhere, compaction isn't your issue, and the cause of any lawn stress you're seeing is something else worth investigating separately. If you're hitting resistance at 2 or 3 inches in specific spots, mark your calendar for a core aeration rental this fall for cool season grass, or late spring for warm season grass, and start a compost routine this season regardless. A 1/4 inch spread twice a year, so you're building the long-term biological fix while you wait for the ideal aeration window. And the next time your lawn goes brown in a heat wave, before you blame the sun, grab that screwdriver first, because there's a real chance the heat isn't the actual problem. It's just the thing that finally showed you a problem that's been building for a while. That's the real reason most lawns actually die in summer, and it's rarely just the temperature. Thanks a lot for watching, and let me know in the comments what your screwdriver test showed when you tried it in your own yard. Now, if you're serious about fixing your lawn without wasting more money guessing at products, you need the right equipment and a plan. My book appearing on your screen right now is a straight step-by-step blueprint to a greener lawn with fewer weeds, exactly what to buy, where to get it, and when to put it down. Scan the QR code or click the link below to get your copy, or head over to fixyourlawn in30days.com to get the lawn you deserve. Have a good day, and I'll see you in the next one.